The patrol car moved through Culiacan the way patrol cars always do, without urgency, without announcement, blending into the morning traffic with the practiced invisibility of public authority. It was white, dusty at the wheel arches, bearing the logo of the Culiacan Municipal Police on both doors, Al Servicio de la Comunidad, at the service of the community. The words were faded from sun exposure, which in Sinaloa is a kind of honesty. The city was going about its business. Produce trucks were already making their runs to the agricultural warehouses on the southern periphery. School children in blue and white uniforms moved in clusters along the sidewalks, backpacks making them look top heavy, like small people carrying other small people on their backs. From somewhere in the tangle of residential streets east of the Humaya River, the smell of corn tortillas on a comal drifted through the open windows of the car, specific and domestic and ordinary. Inside the car, two officers rode in silence. They had been given a name and a general description and a neighborhood, and they had found the man without difficulty because they had resources that ordinary people searching for someone do not have: access to utility records, vehicle registrations, cellular location data that the Culiacan Municipal Police could obtain through channels that did not involve warrants. The man was on foot this morning, moving along a street he apparently walked regularly. He felt perhaps at home there. He had no particular reason to feel otherwise. His name was Alexander Meza Leon. He was a resident of Culiacan. He had a family. He had for some months been providing information to agents of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration about the narcotics trafficking activities of Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar and his associates. He had done this carefully, using protocols that were supposed to protect his identity. Someone had found out anyway. The patrol car stopped beside him. The officers got out. They showed their badges: the shield, the eagle, the same words on the door of the car, and they told him he needed to come with them. He had no legal basis to refuse. They were police officers. He was a citizen. The transaction was brief and public and entirely unremarkable to anyone watching from the street, which was its purpose. A relative who was with him was taken too. The officers did not take Alexander Meza Leon and his relative to a police station. They drove to a location where other men were waiting, men who did not work for the municipal police, who wore no uniforms, who carried weapons that police officers do not carry. The transfer was quick. The officers got back in the patrol car and drove away. What happened next? What was done to Alexander Meza Leon and his relative, and to several members of his extended family in the days that followed, including a 13-year-old boy and belongs in the evidence documentation of the people who assembled it. What belongs here is the simpler fact: they were tortured and killed. All of them. The order had come from Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, El Chapo's eldest son, who had been informed that Alexander Meza Leon was the source of intelligence helping American law enforcement build cases against the Chapitos and their government allies. The mechanism of delivery, the patrol car, the officers, the municipal police infrastructure of the state capital of Sinaloa had been provided by Juan Valenzuela Milan, a police commander who was on the Chapitos' monthly payroll and who had been for 6 years. The patrol car went back to its regular duties. This book is about how that becomes possible, not how it becomes inevitable. Nothing about what happened in Sinaloa between 2021 and 2026 was inevitable. At every point in this story, different choices were available to the people who made the choices that appear here. But choices are made inside contexts, and the context of Sinaloa in 2021, its history, its geography, its economics, its political culture, the American appetite for opioids, the Chinese chemistry that made fentanyl cheap, the particular moment when all of these forces converged in the gubernatorial ambitions of a professorial senator named Ruben Rocha Moya, produced a context in which the choices that were made become, in retrospect, comprehensible even if they are not excusable. This is the story of how a state government was purchased, how it was used, and what it cost. It is also the story of the man who hunted the people who bought it. Chapter 1. Annabelle, the journalist who became the story. She keeps her bodyguards close and her sources closer. Annabelle Hernandez has been writing about the intersection of Mexican politics and organized crime since 1993, which means she has been doing it for longer than some of the people she writes about have been alive. She was 21 when she took her first job at the newspaper Reforma, young enough that the job felt like an adventure rather than a vocation, and the vocation found her before she could find it. Her first front page story was about electoral irregularities, which in Mexico is a subject that, if you follow it seriously and long enough, leads with the inevitability of gravity toward the same dark place. By 2010, she had published Los Señores del Narco, Narcoland in English, a book that named names at a level of specificity that no Mexican journalist had previously dared or survived to publish. The book accused sitting and former officials of direct collaboration with the Sinaloa cartel. It sold more than 100,000 copies. It also produced something else: credible threats against Hernandez's life that required her to acquire the kind of protection that only people who have made themselves dangerous to powerful men require. She was given bodyguards. She accepted them with the clear-eyed pragmatism that characterizes everything about her. She did not stop reporting. By 2021, Hernandez had moved to Berkeley, California, where she holds a fellowship in investigative reporting at the Graduate School of Journalism. She lives with her 2 children. She does not go to restaurants without knowing the exits. She checks her car before she gets in it. These are habits, not drama, the same way a lifelong swimmer checks the tide before going in. In the spring of 2021, with Sinaloa's gubernatorial election approaching and Ruben Rocha Moya emerging as the Morena candidate, Hernandez began receiving information from sources she had cultivated over decades inside and around the Sinaloa cartel. The information concerned meetings. Specific meetings in specific locations between specific people. Meetings in which the political future of Sinaloa was being negotiated not in party offices or Senate corridors, but in cartel-controlled properties in Culiacan and in the mountains of Badiraguato, where El Chapo had been born and where his family still maintained a compound. She listened carefully. She cross-referenced. And in June 2022, a year after the election that had put Rocha Moya in the governor's mansion, she published what she had found. She called it what it was: an electoral narco pact. The architecture of what she described was this. In early 2021, Morena operatives, including figures connected to then-Senator Rocha Moya's campaign, met with Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, El Chapo's eldest son, in Culiacan. The Chapitos controlled territory, people, and the machinery of political violence. Their support meant votes, obtained by persuasion where possible and by other means where necessary. In exchange, the cartel's condition was straightforward: stop any persecution, any arrest warrants, any extradition proceedings that threatened Chapitos' operations and leadership. The arrangement extended to the blessing of Ismael Zambada Garcia, El Mayo, whose approval was required before any significant political arrangement in Sinaloa could be finalized. Additional meetings, Hernandez reported, had taken place at the home of Consuelo Loera, El Chapo's mother, in La Tuna, the mountain village in Badiraguato. El Chapo's brothers were present. It was in these mountains, in the house of an old woman whose son was serving life in an American supermax prison, that the political future of Sinaloa's 3 million people was discussed. Ivan had also taken a direct role in the propaganda campaign. At one meeting in Culiacan, with a pistol visible on his waistband and a group of armed men around him, he instructed that videos be produced in support of Rocha Moya and distributed on social media. Famous Norteño and banda musicians appeared in the videos. In April 2021, Rocha Moya himself filmed a video thanking those musicians for their support. The election had not simply been supported by the cartel, it had been produced by the cartel in the way that a major motion picture is produced, with planning and financing and creative direction, and a distribution network that reached into every corner of the state. The Morena Party's response was characteristic of powerful parties confronted with inconvenient journalism. Senator Kitlali Hernandez, no relation to Annabelle, dismissed the reporting as gossip without rigor. Annabelle Hernandez's response to attacks of this kind has always been the same: more reporting. She kept her sources close. She kept writing. She would later say, after the formal charges against Rocha Moya were unsealed in New York, "I published this in 2022. I was called a liar, a gossip, a political tool. Now the charges say the same things I reported, with more names and more detail. I am not surprised. I am never surprised. This is how Mexico works. The question is never whether the corruption exists. The question is always how long it takes everyone else to